Melissa, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank
You
you
know
very
how
much.
much I've been looking forward to
But
this.
I've been looking forward to it as well.
Brilliant. Tell me, who is Melissa Donato Roos?
Gosh, that's such a big question, isn't it? Um, do I have like one word or something? No,
Nope.
I have a couple
How could you
words.
do that?
Okay, so who am I? I am a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a dreamer. I'm a founder. I'm a writer. I'm a risk taker. I'm a CEO. I'm a board member. I'm a friend. I'm a woman.
Force of nature.
I'm a woman.
So much energy. Where did it all start then? So there's so much there, and pieced together, there's things you were born with, being a woman and so on, but then there's this corporate career.
Mm.
There's the work you're doing in charity, which we'll come to. But those early influences, who and what kind of shaped who you are now?
I think, probably everyone says this, but I think a big part of who I've become probably originates with my family. I'm a family of, a background of immigrants who came to the US from Italy. So I have Italian origins, but American nonetheless. Now British, of course. You can tell by my accent. I've been in this country now 20 years, but I think, the early influences were probably societal, probably my family. My dad was an early entrepreneur. He used to bring me to work with him as a very, very young baby and child. So I used to hear him talking about business and hear him inventing things and dreaming about things. And, there's a lot of pomp and circumstance in my house, but I grew up very, very humble. I mean, I was one of the kids that went for free school meals. You would call them here, right?
Sure.
In this country. So I was the kid that stood in line and had the free lunch ticket. And I was the kid that was part of the family that got free cheese and milk from the town hall, right? I was the one that was, with the rust on the side of my car. So I used to beg my mother to drive and pick me up at school on the non-rusty side so that no one saw, where I came from. So, humble origins. And then and the word, poor or disadvantaged, never, ever, I was never poor. I was rich in so many ways, maybe just not
So a
financially.
happy childhood.
Yeah, a really great childhood. I mean, I thought I could do and be anything. I mean, I wouldn't say, folks, friends come around to, our home or, to where we work. And I often get the question, is this what you dreamt about when you were young? And I said, never had dreams this big, ever, ever. I never dreamt that I would
But there's
be who I am.
but by wanting to get out, be dropped off with the car, rust being on the wrong side, there's almost an element there of ambition, harbored ambition and drive. So when I said happy childhood, it's like you had love, you had support, but it feels like there was desire and ambition to actually go, I'm going to work out how to get these things, how to not have to
Yeah.
hide these things. And that's of course what you've gone and done. So that was quite an early
Yeah,
shaping,
my
right?
mother used to say, "Let's get in the car and drive around the rich people's neighborhoods. I want to see the houses." And I was the one that said, "I don't want to be in the car, and I don't want to see what I don't have, and or I don't want to see what I can't have now. I'd rather just look ahead rather than look at what other people have." So there was a bit of me that self belief, but doubt at the same time. I can't have it today, so I'm not going to bother looking at what I can't have. I don't want it rubbed in my face, kind of thing. And she used to
I
love to
resonate with that.
drive around and look at people's houses and stuff. I mean, I still don't know why she does that.
But you ultimately have created a scenario where you've made yourself go and do that. So you haven't gone looking, you haven't been observing.
Yeah.
You're a doer. You're not. I get it. You're not someone that goes and like, how can I go and get it? So where did that mindset come from? Like your dad taking you to his work and so on. But ultimately, Melissa went into a very successful corporate career that's allowed you to buy the nice houses in the nice neighborhood. So where did that transition of kind of from not looking to I'm going to have it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a slow burn, perhaps. Like it wasn't one day I woke up and said, "Oh, I'm going to do this." I just always kept moving and growing and wanting more. And my first job, my very first job as a software engineer, I said I want to be promoted every year, and I'd get promoted. I'd do anything to get the promotion every year. I always wanted more. My mother says I'm never happy with what I've got. Maybe that comes into play. I don't know. But you always want more, Melissa. You're always looking for something else. You're always striving for things. You're not happy with what you've got. Maybe that desire always lived, right, and always wanting more. You get to A, you want B. You get to B, you want C. You get to D, and it goes on and on and on. And so I guess it was like a slow burn that was constantly growing. Like we talked about it once before. It's like, well, I never. If you asked me, the 10-year-old or 15-year-old or 30-year-old me, you're going to be the first woman to list a billion-euro business on the German stock exchange. I would tell them they're out of their minds. Like, Yeah, probably not me. Or you're going to be a CEO. Yeah, probably not me. I mean, I still have my first CEO business card, and I treasure that as I can't believe they gave me the job. So while I wanted more and felt like I could do it, I didn't think anyone else thought I could do it.
Yeah. But you manifest that and you make it then happen. And I think you very quickly you'd have got past the whole, didn't think I could be a CEO, now I am. What's the next thing? Because you listed some of the things that you're on the board of Porsche.
I am on the board
You
of
know,
Porsche. Yeah.
there are huge global names you're associated with. And I think a key thing as well we must bring into the conversation is in many instances the first woman to be so, which
Yeah.
is a triumph. It's an
And
achievement,
sad at
but
the
you,
same
but
time.
isn't that's the thing?
Yeah.
That's I'm complimenting you there, coming from a heartfelt. But actually, you reframe that as all that energy. That your shoulders slump for a minute, they come right back up again quickly. But that frustrates you. So I know that a key part of one of the things I want to talk to you about was actually is that shift changing? Are you in any way, from a role model point of view, from kicking like in the corporate sector, are you seeing that changing?
How far have we come, right? I was on the cover of ERP magazine. Now probably it must be 4 or 5, 7 years ago. And the cover of this magazine said, literally, how far have we come? And there's a picture of me in a man's suit with a bun,
I've seen it.
yeah. And they open it up and there was the real me, which looks like me, high heels and big hair and makeup and the whole bit. And that was, call it 7, 8 years ago. And how far we come 7 years ago, we haven't come that far. I mean, and we didn't go far then, and I don't think we've moved the needle that far even since that article was published. And we were troubled then, in my view. And yes, I've done these amazing things, and the first woman to do this or that, or joining the board of Porsche. But I joined the board of Porsche, and when I went to Germany the first time, I spoke at an event with the Handelsblatt, and so many people there said, "I can't believe they gave you the job." I can't believe they get like, that was a big decision for, a German business of this size and scale and brand to give, well, you, the job. And make no mistake about it, I've been very vocal over the years about not loving quotas. However, quotas are a bit like an antibiotic. I learned this from a friend of mine most recently. We talked about quotas. You need an antibiotic to solve a problem. It's not meant for you to live on, right? So quotas are like that a bit. And I was a successful bit of the quota system in Germany, which requires 30% of women to be sitting on public boards. So they had to do a shakeup in Germany. They had to do a shakeup of Porsche to get more women on their board. I had recently done an IPO in Germany. Porsche was coming against an IPO. I was helping giving some advice to Oliver Blume, who's the CEO of Porsche, on what the IPO was like and how to work with the bankers and the public markets. So I was a good choice. I was a great choice, in fact. But make no mistake about it, that was probably the initial reaction was because they needed a woman. Now I've since been renewed, and it's been many years since I've been on the board, and a very, I would view, and I think they too, a successful, component of that board. But just the need for these quota systems, this need to make concerted efforts to move the dial. How far have we come? We still face it every single day. I mean, we still do. I mean, not long ago, I was at an executive session with the CEO of one of the world's largest banks, and as you know, I sit on the board of J.P. Morgan here in Europe. It wasn't J.P. Morgan, by the way; it was a different bank. And I walked in a black suit, and they were the biggest business leaders, bankers, politicians in Germany at the time, and I was the CEO, and I had just done a multi-billion-dollar listing for the first time as a woman. And I walked in, and one of the politicians asked me for a glass of champagne, as if I worked there.
Wow.
I did an interview very similar to this in Germany not long ago, and they said, "You look more like a beauty queen than you look like a CEO." And this is within the last 4 years. So, and that's okay, that happens to be in Germany, and it's the same everywhere. It's not limited to just there. And in fact, the person that asked me was not, was actually French, wasn't even German. It happened to be in Munich, but it was a French politician. So no matter where you are, whether in the U.S. or Europe or the UK, how far we come, we've got a lot of work to do. I
Sounds like it.
genuinely
And
believe we have a lot of work
I
to do.
didn't know what you were going to say when I asked that. I actually hoped for a different outcome. Actually, I was hoping you'd say, "Yeah, I'm seeing change," and because you're a role model, and we've talked about this off camera before. Looking like you do as a CEO of a multi-billion tech company and all the other things that you do is so powerful. And so, are there girls and women that can look to you as a role model that can start to believe in themselves more, push these these situations that need changing, because you can look like you and sit in the boardroom rather than being whatever the stereotypical woman should look like, or more importantly, it clearly has always been a man in a
Yeah.
suit.
Yeah.
And it needs to change, clearly.
Yeah.
It's 2025, and we talk about this all the time in other industries and other sectors, but it doesn't seem to be changing at the top, at the boardroom.
That's right. That's exactly right. And in fact, I mean, we'll talk about inner wings and the charity in a moment, but I think when it comes to that, this is one of the reasons why inner wings was born in the first instance, because there weren't enough people in the boardroom that looked like me. And there wasn't enough diversity, and without diversity of what we look like and who we are, there's no diversity of thought, right? It's in a boardroom, you can't have birds of a feather. Not everyone can look alike, otherwise there'll never be a diversity of thinking and a new way of looking. And by the way, no one, I don't care who, but no one's customers look exactly the same either. So you have to have a diversity of thought in the boardroom, and that hasn't existed in the true organic sense. We've had to really push our way through. And of course, it's gotten better statistically. We're doing a lot of effort and a lot of work around trying to get more diversity in boardrooms, but we're still haven't come far enough, not even a little bit. And the question you asked was, can I be, a role model? And there's a lot of evenings I want to go home and sit down with my husband and be at peace for myself for a minute, but I don't. I really try and be present. I really try and be visible. And I really try and make myself vulnerable, and be out there and be present and be visible to show, because for girls and for women, you can't be what you can't see. Literally, you can't be what you can't see. And if you don't have the role models to look up to and towards, women and girls in particular, the way that our brain forms, we struggle. I mean, you have to have some sort of role model behavior and inspiration, and at the same time, I don't want preferential treatment either, right? I don't want to be chosen because I'm a woman. You do
On merit.
sometimes. No, I want to be chosen for merit, and I want women to work hard and not think that I'm going to give them favoritism because of their gender either, right? Which is a different problem. You get a lot of women that say, well, Melissa's a woman. She'll hire me because I'm a woman. That doesn't work like that either, right? We all should get equal treatment, but I just want to be visible enough to inspire people. And, I still, rare do I walk into a room and they say, oh, what do you do? And I say CEO, or I'm a chair, or I sit on the board of JP Morgan, or I sit on the board of, Porsche, or I work with Muse. I do all of these things. I have founded a charity. I'm an author of 3 children's books. And they're like, sorry, you do what? Really? How do you fit that in with your hair? Because that looks like it takes a long time to do.
And
It
you're
doesn't, by the
smashing
way.
it as well, right? It's not even like you're
Trying,
doing that. You
trying
are.
to
No,
smash it.
you
I'm
are.
trying to smash it. I'm trying to
Because
smash it.
when we first sat down, I said how excited I was to talk to you. I've got 2 daughters, you know this,
I do,
13 and
yeah.
15-year-old girls growing
Yeah.
up. So the importance of role models is something I've really learned through conversations like this, where I've been wanting to champion women in business and entrepreneurship and try and understand why less than 2% of VC funding goes
Goes
to
to women.
women. And is that an archaic, broken system, which clearly there's a lot of work to be done there, but also that lack of self-belief and self-confidence, particularly in young girls, that can carry through to them not having the confidence to ask for promotion, to position themselves where they should, where men just automatically do it, or to start their own business. So let's talk about inner wings, because there's such a why there. I mean, you've almost reverse engineered the why, but
Yeah.
it takes something to feel strongly about something, try and make change, but then to actually put your money into something and commit time. You were at number 10 Downing Street last week,
We
right?
were,
I saw it
yeah, the
pop up on
charity was at
Instagram.
number 10,
So
yeah.
just tell me what you're doing and what the why is there.
Yeah, we are trying to empower all children, because we started out with just girls, and now we really found that boys are oftentimes left behind. Not as often, let's say, as girls, but the boys also too deserve the chance to have to find their inner strength. And Inner Wings is all about that. It's empowering young children between the ages of 6 and 12 with confidence and bravery skills. We even have a workshop very similar to the American version of Toastmasters. We got a child psychologist, and we coupled that with a scientist around how girls' brains form to help them, arm them with public speaking, so they can get up and feel confident about who they are, how they move, how they hold themselves, how they communicate, how they speak, how they build self-belief in themselves. Because, we found that one of the reasons why we don't have enough women in the boardroom, there's a number of theses on why we don't, but one of them is a pipeline issue. And science tells us, not the world according to Melissa or John or anyone else, but science tells us that by the age of 6, girls begin to formulate stereotypes of what a girl could be, should be, what a girl's job looks like, a boy's job looks like, girls' color, boy colors. Is the nurse, the word nurse, a feminine word, a masculine word, firefighter, police officer, CEO. CEO is a masculine word. Oh, really? Because I thought it was a feminine word, right? I don't want to be a princess. I want to be a CEO. That's what we wanted girls to grow up with, right? And to give them the tools to arm them with that confidence and bravery. Because, now you look, and you know this very well, you've got teen girls, as they approach around 16, 85% of girls are on diets. They've lost identity. They're not, thin enough or beautiful enough, or their eyelashes aren't big enough, and their hair's not blonde enough, or they're not whatever it may be. And what we're trying to do is, while we can't help them in issues like, psychological issues or self-harming, we are trying to do is arm them with the confidence and the bravery strong enough to power through one of the toughest phase of life that adolescents will endure as they become young adults. And I think, I learned that myself. I mean, I don't know if I was smart or stupid, really, to get to where I am, because I just did what I wanted to do. I didn't know better, right? But what I would say is I spent most of my young adult life, especially in the early years of business, acting like someone else, dressing like a man, wearing my hair in a ponytail or a bun, wearing in the early days pinstripe skirt suits, not trouser suits because they look too masculine, but skirt suits so I could play the masculine and feminine cards against and with in concert with each other. And only about genuinely, if I put my hand on my heart, only about 10 years ago have I been confident enough to look like I want to look. Right now, one must have, respect for, let's say, the environment you go into. If you do business in Japan or if you go to the Middle East, you must adhere to
That never changes
cultures,
though, right?
culture, of course. But only recently have I afforded myself the opportunity to really be myself and show up genuinely as myself. But even my first CEO meeting, I mean, I wore a ponytail and a t-shirt because I didn't want to look like me, because I was afraid that maybe they think that, you know, I didn't look like a CEO. And in fact, when I did the first transition with the private equity firm at the time, I met a couple of people. It wasn't the firm. It was the people in the room that I was learning from to get advice from to do the transition from the previous CEO. And one of them said to me, "Oh, you were awfully glamorous, aren't you? How are you going to get along with open source engineers?"
What a label.
This was 2020. This was 2019. It's not long
And
ago.
for context, 2025 now, it's not that long ago.
No,
Far too recent.
it's a minute ago, right? And what am I doing? Maybe I need to bring it back a little bit. Maybe I need to not wear my hair down. Maybe I need to, not wear my high heels. Maybe I need to change myself
So you
to
questioned
fit the
yourself
mold.
then, whereas
100%.
now you probably go right back at
I
him.
don't I don't care now. Now I'm gonna be who I am, and I encourage women, and this is what Inner Wings is about, is finding that strength and that bravery and that confidence. You can not have to pretend to be someone you're not, or not have to try and fit the mold, or, what the perception of your desire, your job, your career, your area of study should be. This is all about finding the bravery to be yourself. And, and that's the one thing that I try and advise all the women. Talk about role model earlier. Well, okay, if I teach nothing to the girls, if I lead nothing by example, I try and teach women or men, anyone, to be your authentic self. Be who you are. Don't hide, because guess what? The real you is going to come out anyway.
That's
It's
phenomenal.
going to come out.
There's the resilience in you that is just, and although so much of what you are doing within the wings and what we should all be doing is trying to build our own confidence through curiosity, the right role models, and then taking a responsibility of our own actions, if you like, just putting it back to you, that resilience, that strength, that energy you've got. Have you always had that? Are there certain moments in your life that have almost built your resilience? The things that have shaped you, if you like.
I thought I was one of the most female, it was senior female executives at Salesforce at the time. And I was going from strength to strength, and really building a very good business. I was early on with Salesforce in Europe. So, early employee. So I thought I was doing really well with my career. And then I fell pregnant with Francesca, who's now 11. And, managing that first 6 months of a baby. And I walked into the office actually at Salesforce Tower, and people, when first day I came back after 4 months off of maternity leave, they looked at me and said, "I wondered if you come back. I wonder how you're gonna, how you're gonna do this, because you're such a visible, you know, the force of nature, leading female executive on behalf of tech in the UK, on behalf of tech globally, and on behalf of the office. We wondered how you were to come back, and it's so great to see you. And we were wondering what's going to happen. And then Sheryl Sandberg, if you remember very well, when Sheryl Sandberg lost her husband, it was August of 2015. And I sat at the table, kitchen table, dinner table actually. My baby was asleep. My husband at the time, I was reading the passage that everyone read when Sheryl Sandberg lost her husband. And started crying, and I said to my husband at the time, "My God, if you died, what would I do? I could never live." I mean, first of all, I wouldn't eat because I don't know how to cook. Second of all, I couldn't raise a child. And 45 days later, he was dead very suddenly. And that's not the worst of the story. I mean, that's pretty bad as it is. I had a baby who every single morning would stand up in her little cot and say, "Daddy, daddy, daddy." And every morning he'd go get her. And 22 days later, she stopped after he died saying, "Daddy, daddy, daddy," and said, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." And the loss of my husband at the time was that changed my life. And I think it changed my life because I wouldn't be a CEO if he were alive, because I didn't understand the strength I had. Like, I didn't know what I was capable of doing. I didn't know how strong I was. I didn't know how capable I was. I didn't know what my ambitions were. I was doing great things, but I was happy with that. And then I was faced with death. I was faced with poverty. The police showed up in my house and said, "We found your husband. He's passed away. Oh, and by the way, your rent hasn't been paid in 3 months. And by the way, there's no money in the bank accounts. Oh, and by the way, everything has been sold. I lost my house in Italy. It's been sold." So I had, a deceased husband, a baby 18 months old, and I had no money. Now, luckily, I had a good job. So I managed to borrow some money from a friend of mine, borrowed £50,000 from a friend to get myself out of the debt. I took an advance on my bonus at Salesforce. I put things in place to get myself in order. But that I didn't. If someone said to me, well, in fact, I said to myself, 45 days before, if that happened to me, I couldn't live. And here I was, broke, baby, alone. I had to move out of my house because I hadn't been paid, right? So that started on a whole different trajectory of my life. And I didn't want to carry on. Like, I didn't want to live in an environment like this. But I had this baby looking at me saying, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." And, she started speaking, and she started, at the time we were watching Finding Nemo, and they were going along, and it was, there were three little fish. It was, mommy fish and daddy fish and Nemo going along. Zzz. And Francesca said, "Oh, mommy, mommy fish, baby fish, baby fish." And I said, "Oh, but no, that's a mommy fish, daddy fish, baby fish." She said, "No, mommy fish, baby fish, baby fish." So I had this child, like, I'm going to raise this child to understand, what a man and a woman and a family is like, and how I'm her family, and I'm going to be her mommy, her daddy, and her world. And I downshifted. I downshifted. I did everything I could to say, "Okay, I need to step up. I need to step up for my kid. I need to step up for my life. I need to step up for the women around me." And I walked in the office then again. Now my husband had passed away. Now I wasn't going in as a new mom. I was going in as a widow. And the women were crying in my office. People saw me, broke down crying and ran away because they thought, "Oh my God, what now is going to happen? Now is, what role model will she become? Is she going to live? Is she going to thrive? Is she going to collapse? Is she going to sail? What's going to happen here?" And I downshifted and I said, I'm going to kill it. And I didn't realize I could. And not long after, I got the offer to go on to the next job at SAP, where eventually I met my now husband, my amazing husband. And he and I have gone on together, do amazing things together. I am becoming CEO and founding the charity. My daughter is a gifted child. She's going off to boarding school and done amazing things.
So you
Um,
ultimately thrived because that crossroads, you could have, a lesser resilient person could have been overwhelming.
Most of us spend most of our life trying to figure out who we are, right? And take your time to figure out who you are, but figure out quick and be it. That's number one, right? And number two is, don't wait for a tragedy in your life, because we're all going to have ups and downs. I mean, we all get older, right? Everyone ages. I'm not talking about being old, but we all age, right?
Yeah.
You go from 11 to 12, 12 to 13, 13 to 15, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that, one must not wait for a tragedy in their life to define who you are and to find that inner strength, right? everyone is so far more capable of more than what you do today. I can assure you,
It's
Dan.
crazy how many people need a trauma or an unforeseen to then come alive and then actually
Yeah.
potentially even get close to realizing their full potential. And that's like you say, it's through tragic circumstances and really difficult things
Yeah.
that you
We
have
have no
actually
choice.
you've thrived.
Yeah, you thrive.
You brought up Darren, your husband.
Yeah.
You're a CEO. That is a high pressure um, role that takes you all over the world. And yet that could be something that, there are people probably watching and listening that have got a partner or they themselves are that and their partner is not in their role. Darren is a CEO
I
now.
know, it's really weird.
Does that work?
He's been on the
It
show,
feels
in
like
fact.
100%.
Yeah.
So my point being, it's almost like when you say, "Oh, this has just happened, and I've got to go to Porsche tomorrow. I've got to fly tomorrow." He's just understanding, right? But is there? Oh, I say right, like I'm
Yeah, yeah,
slightly,
he is understanding.
but there's a whole management of time there because between the two of you, you probably have to make sure you make time for each other, right? Because otherwise, you guys could be just. So talk me through that because that's quite an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, we are extremely rare. I mean, not just in Europe, but like anywhere. I mean, it's very, very rare. You're going to have, two. I mean, a couple of years ago when he was the sitting CEO and I was the sitting CEO, you're going to have, I was, CEO of a public company. He was CEO of a private company. Having two CEOs, husband and wife, both private equity backed and founded, and then being in the same household. And now, fast forward, he's a chairman of three companies. I sit on four boards, including my main job with Kariba as I'm chair and CEO. So we have seven boards in our household. Plus we've got the charity that runs out of the house. I mean, well, not out of the house, but runs within us. He's also helping and very passionate about. In addition to having three children and having animals and horses and all these other things, and having hobbies, right? And then
A
you've got
life.
and life, and then you've got each other. Like how do you make time? And I think we really try and do is sometimes he's understanding, by the way, sometimes he's not, right? Because he's like, wait, you're going where? I'm
I
like,
think everyone's glad to hear that, right?
he's not always understanding, even though you'd think he'd be understanding, right? We have a lot to talk about. We find ourselves talking about business and tech and investments
I wondered that.
all of the time. And we have to do our very best because he's my husband, he's my best friend, he's a father, he's a CEO, he's a leader, he's my partner in life. And so there's so many parts of our life that are intertwined that husband and wife normally have. And then you've got the business angle, like, oh, did you hear about this CEO? Did you hear about that company that bought such and such? Oh, did you look at that stock? It's gone down. Did you look about that IPO? Or did you hear about that decision that so and so made? So our life, is not just about each other. It's so intertwined. We really have to do, a lot to try and separate. Always talking about work and start talking more about us and the kids, making time for each other and taking time out. It's hard. It's really hard, but
But you're doing it.
we
You do.
do.
And you mentioned about making time for each other and then for yourself. You look super fit physically. You've got the sparkle in your eye. There's a kind of a mental fitness there for you. There's a lot talked about being successful in business as a CEO, books written about it, podcasts about it. Are you the get up at 4 in the morning, run the marathon,
I
read the
am
book,
that woman.
meditate?
Yeah.
Talk me through your routine.
Yeah, well, I would say that the one thing I've learned, from other CEOs that is that pressure is a privilege, and I love it. And then some CEOs work very well under people work well under pressure, some don't. And I think you have to be good under pressure to be a CEO in the first instance, but that kind of defines who I am at the same time. I love the pressure. I love the speed. I love the ambition, but I also need to channel it somewhere. So I'm an early riser. I love running. We've talked about this off camera that I love running. It's like every morning I'm a runner. Now I've recently been told I run too much. I've only just started incorporating breath work and yoga into my routine. TBD on that. You need to have me back next time. Maybe we'll talk about the next phase of
Work in
life.
progress.
We'll find another reason, yeah, to see how this breath work and this yoga, the calming bit
You're
does.
bringing these things into your life to
Yeah,
find that balance,
balance,
and
yeah.
to give yourself, I guess, a competitive edge and a life edge, if you like, as well,
Yeah,
right?
that's
These you're
right.
experimenting and
High
these are working for
performance.
you now.
Yeah, high
But
performance. There's theory, there's science behind, high performing individuals working on them on their well being. Besides, the weightlifting and the running and all of this, which I do every day. But I think that the pressure is a privilege, and pressure makes diamonds. My mother used to say, right?
I love that.
Yeah, and everyone loves diamonds. I think,
Yeah.
myself included.
Yeah.
So pressure makes diamonds. I think that if we utilize the pressure in the right way and channel the energy in the right way, that's when magical
I love
things
that.
happen.
I don't want this conversation to end. I'm conscious of time, but there's a culmination of this conversation that ultimately, clearly, and rightly so, in a very non-arrogant way, demonstrates success. You've grafted to get there. You're smashing it now. Sitting here right now, how do you define success?
I mean, that's kind of like the opening question. Like I can answer it in like 50 different ways. But I think, at a young age, my mother used to say to me, Melissa, don't be a lady, be a legend. And I never forgot that. And, don't be a lady. Now, I look like a lady and I like being feminine, but I want to leave a legacy. I don't want to die a nobody. I want to have given back more than I've taken. I want to leave something behind. I think part of that is definitely the charity. I mean, we've talked about, the dozens of thousands. We've graduated 25 this year, now about 35,000 by the end of the year, hopefully 50,000 children in 2025. That mark is really important. If I've empowered women to dream bigger and to realize their strength and their ambitions and to do things like, well, if Melissa can do it, I can do it. If what would Melissa say or do or be if she were in this situation? I've had a lot of women. My CIO, when I was at CIO of the last company, her husband was ill. She's actually now an advisory board member for the charity, and her husband fell ill upstairs, and she called me 2 days later and said, I literally sat there and said, "What would Melissa do right now? How do I handle his collapse? What do I do with him?" And she ran downstairs. She said, "I acted like you would act." No, no, for the love of God, don't act like I would act, but maybe screaming and hollering in the streets.
But she looked at you as a role
But
model.
she looked at me as a role model. How would I handle the situation? What does the pressure do? So if I can, measure my success by the number of children that are empowered to do great things, if I can do it with every woman that finds their inner strength or their ambitions to really find out who they are and drive to be that, if I can affect the men to say, I want my daughter to have a role model like this, if I could have, change the world just a little bit, that probably would be what I would measure as success.
What a legacy, right? I mean,
Oh,
just like all the things you could have said, and you bring it back to the fact that when I said how excited I was to talk to you, and the fact that there's this whole empathy, if you like, and my legacy of my two girls, and the fact that they could be coming into an environment that's made in any way changed and better for them through stuff you're doing, then massive
I
congrats to
hope,
you.
I hope.
Yeah,
That's what we're all after.
I don't want this conversation to
I
end.
don't either.
But Melissa, thank you. Thank you
Thank you so
so
much.
much.
Thank you very much for having me. Genuinely.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.